When we think of the American Revolution, we never really consider, in many aspects, the religion of those who fought during the conflict. However, if we were to actually look at the faiths of those men and women who took part in the Revolutionary War, we would discover that it is primarily one found within Protestantism. There were some Catholics who were involved with the American Revolution, but even fewer were another select group of people, namely those who were Jewish. Now, by the time of the American Revolution itself, there were approximately 3,000 Jews living in America, and this would only represent about 0.1% of the total population of those living in America at the time. And yet, for those who were of the chosen people, their history within the United States is one that dates back almost to its very origins. The very first community of Jews to arrive in the New World was in New Amsterdam, which is now called New York, in 1654. Now, their settlements would not only include New York City, but also Newport, Rhode Island in 1695, Savannah, Georgia in 1735, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in 1739, and Charleston, South Carolina in 1745. Now, the oldest synagogue in the United States is Toru Synagogue in Newport, Rhode Island, which was founded in the year 1763. And yet it is Charleston, South Carolina, which was actually the original center of the Jewish community within America, long before New York City could ever hope to claim the title. It was the Kahal Kadosh Bet Elohim Synagogue, which was established in 1749, and in 1794, its current version was completed and is still serving as the oldest continuous synagogue for those practicing Judaism in the United States. Now, like many families during the American Revolution, Jewish families were torn between the independent principles which the Americans were fighting for, while also recalling that Jews were receiving a great deal of liberties under British rule. And therefore, it was very difficult for families to choose which side they ought to be on. Now, interestingly enough, though, both Patriot and Tory Jews were able to put away their differences in order to work together. During the Siege of New York, the Mill Street Synagogue was able to remain open as both Tory and Patriot Jews came together to ensure its survival. Now, during its occupation, it was a Tory who would be in charge of keeping the doors open, and later the congregation would be led by a Hessian who was Jewish and chose to stay in America after the war. But while certainly as a people and the whole group certainly is rather unique during the Revolution, there were a few standout individuals whose lives are rather unique when it comes to the American Revolution. The most famous of them was Francis Salvador, who is rather notable in American history as being the first Jew to ever be elected as a legislator in the United States. He would take part in the Battle of Kiowa River in 1776, found in South Carolina near Fort 96. Now, the battle itself was fought between the South Carolinian militia and British Tories along with their Cherokee allies. Salvador was shot and fell early in the battle, and after American forces pulled back, Cherokee Indians would scalp him, but he would survive the scalping, able to inquire Americans upon their return to the field if they had won. Seeing that he was dying, one of the American officers said yes, and then Salvador said, "I shall die soon," and, much to his own prediction, it came true. Another patriot who had a short span of fighting inside the American Revolution was a young man by the name of Reuben Edding. He came from Baltimore, Maryland, and enlisted to fight in the war upon learning of the battles of Lexington and Concord. After being captured by the British, his faith was soon discovered by his captors, and, choosing to insult him and attempt to demean his faith, the British would only serve Reuben pork. Now, since pork is a forbidden food item for those of the Jewish faith, Reuben was able to sustain himself primarily through the scraps of food that other prisoners had and were able to give to him. However, his condition continued to deteriorate, and upon being freed, he was to pass away very shortly thereafter. But ironically, Reuben gets a bit of a last laugh, as a cousin was also named Reuben Edding, and this younger cousin, who was born in 1762, would go on to serve in the American Revolution, and in 1801 was appointed a United States Marshal by Thomas Jefferson. A unique individual that came from the Jewish faith in the American Revolution was Mordecai Sheftel. Coming from Savannah, Georgia, in 1778 he was appointed Deputy Commissary General for federal troops, but before Congress could approve his appointment, he was captured by the British along with his son. And while both were imprisoned on the prison ship Nancy, they would later be sent to a town which hated Patriots due to its heavy Tory leanings. Fearful for their lives, the two were able to make a brief escape, but were soon recaptured and sent to the island of Antigua, where they would remain until 1780. And in that year, they were finally freed and able to return home to the United States. Perhaps the most underrated and underappreciated member of the Jewish community, who, in my opinion, has done a great deal to help the American cause, was Haim Salomon. He was a Polish immigrant that came to New York and would join the New York Sons of Liberty early in the American Revolution. In 1776, he was arrested as a spy, but would be pardoned by the British due to lack of evidence. Yet the British decided that he had a unique ability which they desperately needed. Namely, he could speak German. And for 18 months, he was detained to act as an interpreter for Hessian soldiers who were there in New York City. Now, Salomon was rather unique, though, in that during his detainment, he would help American prisoners escape and get back to American lines. In addition to that, in speaking with the Hessian soldiers who were there, he would convince a number of them to desert and become farmers in the newly established nation. And he would also work with Hercules Mulligan and Cato to carry out acts of espionage in New York City. Now, in 1778, the British once again would arrest Haim, namely for espionage. But unlike the first arrest, this time they could actually prove his misdeeds, and he would be found guilty and sentenced to death by hanging. Well, not one to actually find himself at the end of a rope, Haim Salomon would successfully escape, and the American people would soon hide him. Once being settled down, Haim Salomon would help to finance the war for the American cause along with Robert Morris. In dealing with the French court and the Dutch republics, Salomon was able to ensure loans were being given to the American cause, helping to fund all of its campaigning during the latter half of the war. When George Washington announced his Yorktown campaign and estimated it would cost $20,000 to finance, Congress said they were broke and could not do it, to which Washington replied, "Get me Haim Salomon." And it was Salomon who would successfully sell bills of exchange, which would then help to finance the campaign, which would lead to the final major American victory militarily of the American Revolution. And so, as we look upon this rather small but unique community within the early days of the American Revolution, it is important to remember that people of all different faiths came together even in the very origins of our nation, where they saw the opportunity to create liberty, and with that liberty, the opportunity to create a whole new world and a better life for future generations to come. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel to join our Sons of the American Revolution family. And remember to come out to all the 250th anniversary events celebrating the birth of our country.